Hi, Doug Pelton from the Frame Up. Today we did the initial startup on one of our restorations, TC 1675, and I want to take a few minutes to go over our thought process and our procedures and preparation before we started the motor. We do this as a matter of routine, so we decided we would start with a control panel because we've got the entire car wired up, but we don't have the dash finished or installed, and we really want to run the motor to make sure everything's good before we do too much assembly and finish work. We happen to have an extra dash panel, and so all we did was install the amp gauge and the oil pressure gauge, and instead of an ignition switch, we just have a basic inline switch, and we use the standard TC accessory switch, which is nothing more than on-off. Right now it's off vertical. Otherwise, this is wired into the regulator, and so it's ready to go with the connections being with the coil and the generator. So we have electric power available for the car startup. The next thing is gas. We've got the gas tank installed as a matter of standard. We put in a couple 3 gallons and ops check the line, make sure there's no leaks for the gas. The next thing that we did for preparation prior to motoring, you want to make sure that you have the oil pump primed and ready to go. And the way we do that is we take the 2 bolts out of here for the line and loosen this connection here, and this just swings out of the way. And what we use is white lithium grease, and it's got just a little spout on the end of it here, so it's easy enough to stick down in the hole, and we just give it a squeeze and force pack the end of the oil pump. And you can take a screwdriver and give a little tap, make sure there's no air. But that's all we do, is just squeeze that in there to fill the void, to allow it to self-prime. The other thing keep in mind is when you put the oil filter on, go ahead and fill the oil filter. It's just one less thing for the motor to have to accomplish. And then the last thing for the oil system, we want to make sure that the oil galley is full and the overhead rocker arm assembly is pre-lubed as well. The way we do that is we take the oil line that goes from the block to the firewall. Now this is a standard steel braided one. The one we have on this car, because it's a very original type restoration, is an early reproduction of that oil line. But regardless, both have the same end fitting. And then we use a standard garden sprayer, bug sprayer. And it just happens that this hose fits into this nut, and using the nut and turning it, it threads on and actually makes a seal. So there's nothing that you need to do. So you tighten that down, and you can't pull that apart. So that's a good solid connection. So this is already on here. You just screw this in and then put your oil in the bug sprayer, and then of course pump away, which pre-lubes the oil galleys and the overhead rocker assembly. Once you have all that complete, and of course make sure your sump is filled up, should be about 5 quarts plus. Then the oil line is ready to go. One thing I did forget to mention is when you reconnect the gaskets here, we use Ultra Black as kind of a standard on the motor with all of the oil line fittings or gaskets. Another one is the Right Stuff. That's a great gasket maker as well. The next thing you want to consider is doing a static timing. And the way we do that is, of course, you have your motor that's rebuilt, and it's going to be on top dead center. And the way you can tell top dead center, if you have your rocker or your valve cover off, your number 1 cylinder, you will have both rockers somewhat loose, meaning that both of the valves are totally closed. If you check 2, 3, and 4 cylinders, one of the 2 rockers will be tight, indicating that one of the valves is in transit and in the open position. So you've confirmed your top dead center, and then what you can do is remove the distributor cap, and then you can turn the distributor slightly. Well, let me back up, because you want to make sure this is number one cylinder. You want to make sure that you're close. You want to make sure that you are close to the number one cylinder with your rotor. Now, we've already run the motor, so it's not the case. But anyway, you want to have that close to the number one firing position, and then you can adjust the distributor itself with the key on, and you'll see a spark. When you get the spark, that's where it's at the firing position. So you should be at the firing position with your motor at top dead center on the number one cylinder. And so that's what we refer to as static timing. So we're going to put this back. We're going to fire it up here in a second. All right, so we've checked the electric, we've done the oil pressure, and so our next step is to actually motor it over until we get oil pressure. We don't want to start it without having oil pressure. So let's watch the oil pressure gauge, and we've got the key off because we don't want to motor the car. So here we go. Okay, we've confirmed we've got oil pressure. And one other thing, when you do that, it's probably good to actually pull the plugs out so the engine motors very freely. So once you got the oil pressure confirmed, we've got the static timing, we've got gas, we've got the control panel set up where we can monitor the electrics and the oil pressure. Now it's time to start. So we're going to turn our switch on. We can hear the gas stop, the gas pump ticks away, so we know we've got fuel. We're checking for fuel leaks. Anything else, and we're ready to start. All right, here we go. I'm going to give it a little bit of choke. Successful start up from the frame up.